Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. Good morning. Suprabhat. Your Excellency Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India, Your Excellencies President Macky Sall of Senegal, President Talon of the Republic of Benin, Vice President Daniel Kablan-Duncan of Côte d'Ivoire, former President of Ghana, John Mahama, the Commissioner of Economic Affairs of the African Union, Dr. Marumping, representing the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, representative of the President Uhuru Kenyatta of Kenya, Minister William Bett, the Chief Minister of Gujarat, Mr. Vijay Rupani, and we are delighted today, me as President of the bank, to always have former presidents of the African Development Bank here with us, and we have three of them here with us today. We have former President Babaka Ndiaye, former President Kabaj, former President Fordwell. Thank you very much, former presidents, for being with us today. Honorable ministers, governors of the African Development Bank, executive directors of the African Development Bank, central bank governors, business leaders, civil society, farmers, agribusiness leaders, media partners, Africa's youth, senior management and staff of the African Development Bank, distinguished guests, partners, ladies and gentlemen, and of course, my own lovely wife, Grace, is here with us. And, you know, Mr. Prime Minister, I can tell you I won't be standing here. I certainly won't be president of the African Development Bank without that lovely lady sitting over there. Welcome to the 2017 annual meetings of the African Development Bank Group. This beautiful facility where we are having the meeting today was actually built in 182 days, I was told by Prime Minister Modi. Prime Minister, there is a personal reason why I am delighted to be back in India. I started my international career in India in 1988 while being a Rockefeller Foundation Social Science Research Fellow at the International Crops Research Institute for the Semi-Arid Tropics, ICRISAT in India, in Hyderabad, India, and the Director General, I think the current one, is also here today. We are all pleased to be here in this beautiful city of Ahmedabad, the home of Mahatma Gandhi, the land of vibrant Gujarat. Its uniqueness lies beyond being a smart mega city. It's based on its being the center of Indian independence. The famous Salt March and the Quit India movements that led to independence in 1947 were held right there in Ahmedabad. So from right here, through this annual meeting, will arise a new spirit of renewal and determination for Africa's accelerated growth and development. Let me thank you, Prime Minister Modi, for hosting this meeting, and the Minister of Finance, Arun Jaitley, and your staffs, and of course the bank staff as well, for your excellent efforts. I know it's hot out here, but I can tell you that the warm hospitality that you've given us even beats the heat. Thank you very much. The success of Gujarat is simply incredible. It has universal access to electricity, no power outages. Rural areas have 24 hours power every single day, 7 days a week. 90% of the world's rough diamonds are cut and polished right here in the state of Gujarat. That's industrialization. Its economy is diversified with vibrant service sectors. Its agriculture is prosperous. It creates jobs, and in fact, the state of Gujarat has an unemployment rate of less than 1%. It has some of the world's best medical centers, and many Africans come here for medical treatments. And because of its vast shoreline, it is key for economic integration of India. So, Gujarat has done essentially the high fives. No wonder Chief Minister Modi, who used to be the Chief Minister of Gujarat, left here to become the Prime Minister Modi. So let's give him a high five. Prime Minister Modi, you are in very good company today, with the dynamism of presidents from Africa that are here today. With uncommon zeal, President Macky Sall is transforming Senegal. President Ouattara, represented by his dynamic vice president, remains resilient and spurring remarkable economic growth in Côte d'Ivoire. And President Talon, a businessman, has already unleashed a wave of economic reforms in Benin. When leaders rise up, things happen. Just like Gujarat, Africa is sparkling today with the world's largest concentrated solar power plant in Morocco and Africa's largest wind power in Kenya. There's a lot Africa and India can share together, especially from Gujarat, because there are so many Gujaratis in Africa. I hear that the people of Ahmedabad, trade and business is in your blood. And when I was speaking to Prime Minister Modi, he reminded me that in Africa we have so many Tukawalas in Africa, and that most of those Tukawalas are actually from here. And so, Prime Minister Modi, you yourself, you are so passionate about trade and investments. I don't know about you, but I told Prime Minister I like his jacket, which is the Modi jacket, and I bought 2 of them. And I think it's the greatest export. And I don't know how Prime Minister Modi does it. He goes around the world, he fills stadiums with people listening to him. And I think it's the greatest export that India has. It's in the blood. Your successful India-Africa summit reinforces the need to boost trade, investment, education, and economic partnerships. Well, Africa is the place to be. Despite challenging times occasioned by global economic recession, Africa continues to post resilient growth. Growth will pick up from 2.2% last year to 3.4% this year. These averages hide exceptional growth performance of many countries. In 2016, 12 countries grew at over 5%, and 20 countries grew by 3 to 5%. Africa's head is above waters in rising waters of global recession. Africa remains resilient, but we must move quickly to unlock greater growth rates that will substantially drive down poverty and support faster diversification of African economies. Confidence in Africa and its potential is what drives our work at the African Development Bank. The new kick in our steps for Africa comes from our high fives: Light Up and Power Africa, Feed Africa, Industrialize Africa, Integrate Africa, and improve the quality of life of the people of Africa. These high fives will accelerate Africa's development. Don't just take it from me. The United Nations Development Programme's independent analysis and report shows that if Africa simply focuses on these high fives, Africa will achieve 90% of the Sustainable Development Goals and 90% of Agenda 2063. The distance between vision and reality is measured in actions. We need to accelerate action on these high fives. Africa's future must not continue to get postponed way into the future. That's why the bank is concentrating on accelerating its investments in Africa. In 2016, we approved $10.5 billion, the highest in the history of the bank. We disbursed $6.5 billion, also the highest ever in the history of the bank. The bank is delivering for Africa, and we are ready to do more. Let me summarize what we have achieved as a group in 2016 alone in what I call action units. 3.3 million Africans benefited from new electricity connections. 3.7 million Africans benefited from improved access to water and sanitation. 5.7 million Africans benefited in terms of support from agriculture. 9.7 million Africans benefited in terms of access to better healthcare services, and 7 million Africans benefited in terms of access to improved transport. We did all this while implementing major institutional reforms to improve our institutional efficiency and effectiveness. We have rolled out our new development and business delivery model, and 5 regional business development and delivery officers have been approved by our board of directors. Directors generals and deputy director generals for all these offices have been appointed. I am pleased to let you know that 80% of the deputy director generals are women. I firmly believe in the importance of women in senior leadership. I've never seen a bird that flies with only one wing. A bird flies only with 2 wings. And when Africa gets women equality right, it will move faster than it is moving today. We have approved the opening of new offices in Benin Republic, in Niger, and in Guinea. So President Talon, who is here with us today, will be one of our new hosts, and we are grateful to you, Mr. President, for your support. Thank you very much. The focus of this year's annual meeting is on our second high five, Feed Africa. There is no better place to have that discussion than right here in India. The Green Revolution turned India from depending on the largest of others to a food self-sufficient nation and now a global powerhouse in food. And it took just 3 years to turn all of that around. It was not a miracle. It was political will mixed with resolve to develop with dignity. To develop with pride, Africa must feed itself. Africa's food import bill stands at $35 billion a year and is estimated to grow to $110 billion a year if we do nothing by 2025. This obviously has negative consequences on macroeconomic and fiscal stability. Africa must rise up quickly and unlock the full potential of its agriculture. Africa has 65% of the uncultivated arable land left in the world to feed 9 billion people by 2050. So, what Africa does with agriculture today will determine the future of food in the world. The key is to turn Africa's natural comparative advantage in agriculture into a competitive advantage. We must accelerate access to high-quality seeds, fertilizers, irrigation, mechanized services, and finance, and agriculture must be taken as a business all across Africa. The needs of industrializing the agriculture is so important, and therefore Africa must industrialize that sector to unlock wealth. To achieve this, Africa needs to establish staple crop processing zones and agro-industrial zones, fully enabled with physical infrastructure to attract private agribusinesses to locate in rural areas, create market pull for produce of farmers, and reduce high post-harvest losses in the supply chains. By doing so, we will turn rural areas in Africa, in many places, from zones of economic misery to zones of economic prosperity. We will be able to empower African countries to add greater value for what they produce. Our massive cotton production will translate into textiles and garments. After all, the price of apparels never goes down, even when the price of cotton declines. That's why we are pleased to showcase Fashionomics session at this annual meeting. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Africa produces 75% of the world's cocoa, but it receives only 2% of a $100 billion annual chocolate market. African farmers sweat while others eat sweets. While the price of cocoa has hit an all-time low, profits of global manufacturers of chocolates have hit an all-time high. It's time to process Africa's cocoa in Africa, for we must end Africa being at the bottom of global value chains. We are taking action. That's why the African Development Bank has rolled out its Feed Africa High Five strategy, and we have committed to investing $24 billion in agriculture over the next 10 years. That is 400% increase in terms of our annual spending in the sector. We are investing in companies like East Africa Export Trading Group, which provides market access for millions of farmers. We have developed what we call technologies for African agriculture transformation, a new technology platform that would take technologies to millions of farmers all across Africa. And you have all heard from Bill Gates. We've just launched together with others the African Leaders for Nutrition to help address the high malnutrition and stunting levels in Africa. But these efforts will only succeed if Africa improves access to electricity. As we resolve Africa's access to electricity, agro-industrialization will take off in Africa, boosting rural economies, creating jobs for the youth, and lifting millions out of poverty. We are taking action. That's why the bank is investing $12 billion in the power sector in the next 5 years and leveraging $50 billion from the private sector. We have moved very quickly to set up the Vice Presidency for Power, Energy, Climate, and Green Growth, and recruited world-class staff. In 2016, the bank invested $1.7 billion in energy, and we leveraged $2.5 billion. Our last-mile power connection work in Kenya is linking 1 million people to electricity. We led the syndication of $965 million AB syndicated loan for South Africa's utility that's called Eskom, the largest in Africa's history. We provided energy sector reform budget support of $1 billion to Algeria, and we are very proud of our work with Algeria. Our support last year provided 22,000 kilometers of distribution lines. The bank hosts the Africa Renewable Energy Initiative, co-developed with the African Union, with commitments of $10 billion by G7 countries, including the European Union. We are very delighted with Prime Minister Modi's launch of the International Solar Alliance, and we look forward to the establishment of the India-Africa Energy Co-Financing Facility between the government of India and the African Development Bank. And I would like you to please put your hands together and thank the Prime Minister for helping us in this particular direction. Climate change is affecting Africa very badly. East and Southern Africa have been hit by droughts, costing many lives and putting over 20 million people at the risk of famine. It's the worst humanitarian disaster since 1945. But we are taking action. Our board of directors, of executive directors, and they work enormously hard, have recently approved the framework for our Say No to Farming campaign for a comprehensive response, which will provide short, medium, and long-term support of $1.1 billion eventually to South Sudan, Somalia, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Nigeria. We've got to build climate resilience for Africa. The promises made to Africa on climate adaptation must be kept, not dismissed or unpaid. Adaptation to climate change is what is needed, not adaptation to the promises that were made. Well, something else is changing in Africa and how we organize our annual meetings at the African Development Bank. Africa's youth, now our largest constituency, are very well represented here. If you're the youth and you're here, please, I would like you to rise so we can welcome you, because you are now our greatest constituency at the bank. Please welcome all our young people that are here with us at the bank. The youths are not only the future of Africa, but they are also the present of Africa. Therefore, we must make their present prosperous and their future even brighter, much brighter. Africa's youth population will rise from 434 million to 840 million by 2050, and Africa will become the youngest region of the world. 38 out of the 40 countries that will be the youngest in the world will be in Africa. The median age of Africans will be 25 by that time. This is a huge demographic asset, which, if well-tapped and well-trained, will make Africa the talent center of the future. But today, their situation is not prosperous. 1/3 of them are unemployed or discouraged. 1/3 is in vulnerable employment, and only 1 out of 6 of them is in wage employment. If we can cut back the unemployment rate of the youths to the same as the adults, African economies will grow by between 10 to 20%. We will reduce the number of 1 million migrants from Africa to Europe in 2016 alone, some 160,000 alone to Italy, and avoid 5,000 young people whose future now lies buried at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. And I do not believe that the future of African youth lie at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. Africa's youth unemployment rates stares us in the face, stirs up our conscience, and calls us to action. Africa's youth don't need handouts. They need support to spark their creativity and unleash their entrepreneurship. We are taking action. That's why the bank launched the Jobs for Africa's Youth, designed to support Africa to create 25 million jobs for youths and impact 50 million youths within 10 years. Making agriculture cool for the youth is a key part of our action plan. That's why we invested $800 million in 2016 to support 50,000 young commercial farmers and agribusiness entrepreneurs in 8 countries. Some of them are also here in this room today. They are the future for Africa's agriculture. Our job at the African Development Bank is to bank on Africa's future. We will trust the youths. We will support their dreams. We will spark their creativity, and we will enable their entrepreneurship. We will do more as our resources expand, for we cannot wait to give hope for millions of Africa's youth. To do more for Africa, its economies, its youth, and women, the bank needs a lot more resources. That's why it will be critical to begin discussions on how we will recapitalize the African Development Bank. The German Minister for Development and International Cooperation, Gerd Müller, got it right when he said, and I quote him, "The African Development Bank is the voice for Africa. It should be given resources to do more for Africa. A recapitalized bank will be able to deploy resources to meet the rapidly rising needs of a continent so thirsty for development. It will allow the bank to deliver on its high fives and allow Africa to meet 90% of its sustainable development goals. The high fives form the best deal for Africa's development. But fast-tracking Africa's development also means fast-tracking private investments. For those of you that are here today with business in your blood, let me make the case for investments. Think of a continent that will have the same population as India and China taken together by 2050. Think of a continent with rapidly rising middle class, rapid urbanization, and that will have the youngest population on Earth by 2050. Think of a continent where consumer spending is projected to reach $1.4 trillion in the next 3 years, and business-to-business spending to reach $3.5 trillion in the next 8 years. Think of the continent that accounted for 30% of global business and regulatory reforms in 2016. Don't look far. Think Africa. To help unlock massive investments in Africa, we are taking action. I am pleased to announce that the African Development Bank will be launching later this year the Africa Investment Forum. This will be a totally transactional forum that will be all about making deals happen and fast-tracking investments in Africa by pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, insurance funds, and other institutional investors. So, Africa's huge investment opportunities beckons to you, from agriculture to agribusiness to energy to infrastructure and financial services. And the African Development Bank and its partners will be there to help you advance your investments. Let's move forward to a greater Africa. Let's together accelerate Africa's development. Africa's greater future is for the bold. Yes, we have challenges, but we will overcome them. As John Legend said in his song, "If you are out there, the future was yesterday, and we are already late." So let's give Africa the high fives, and let's strongly support the African Development Bank to get the job done. I wish you a fruitful and enjoyable annual meeting. Thank you very much. Dan Yavad.